In a certain city, a politician was running for office, and he advertised for volunteer workers. There were so many young women appeared for the job as volunteers that there was a near riot. Were they interested in politics? No. The first question they asked was, how many men have appeared? They were part of the lonely young women of this great city. And then I know of an old woman who stays up every night until 12 o'clock to hear the announcer say, "We are now signing off. Good night, and have a good sleep." That relieves her of her loneliness. There was really and truly, a woman wrote to me and told me that my program was the only one to which her cat ever listened. So our subject tonight has to do, to some extent, with loneliness. It affects all ages. Children are lonely. 5 million of them belong to divorced parents in this country. Boys get lonely. That's why they join gangs, because they get power which they do not individually have. Young girls are lonely when they get a pimple on the nose. Older girls are more lonely still when the boy treats them as a glass, throws the glass aside after he has taken the drink. They find then that they're just a replaceable part in the great erotic IBM machine. Their loneliness increases. Then there's the loneliness of leadership, being the top man on the totem pole. There's the loneliness of being at the bottom of the totem pole, because you're just one of the masses. You're apt to lose your personality. The loneliness sometimes of marriage, where all the jokes have been told. There's no new event to narrate. And it's the terrible solitude of being alone together. And then even when it does remain fine and noble and rich, even in moments of greatest unity, there is a feeling of apartness after such an ecstasy. One hopes to completely submerge oneself, and yet one finds oneself back again. The hypochondriacs, of course, are lonely. And so we were asked to talk on this program about this subject of loneliness. And I'm going to give, after these facts, which we have just narrated, I'm going to give first the causes, and then I'm going to suggest some remedies. Now, I didn't know whether to use the blackboard or not. My angel is here, and I cannot think of any diagram that I could use. Just write causes on the board. So I'm afraid I will not be able to use my angel, but just before I came on the program, he wanted to know if I would play a game of golf with him tomorrow. And I told him that I was not old enough for golf because I play tennis twice a week. When I get old, I am going to play golf, and I'm going to have a wagon, too, to take me around from hole to hole. But he was telling me that the other day he was playing golf, and he drove off 225-yard hole it was, and the ball went right into the cup. And he looked up to heaven and he said, "Dear Lord, let me do this by myself." He's not a lonely angel, as you see. Now, what are the causes of loneliness? Well, one of the causes of loneliness has to do, first of all, with the lonely people themselves. And another reason why they are lonely is because of people who are not lonely. First of all, on account of the lonely themselves. They want to be loved too much. They want to love, to be loved. Now, there's nothing wrong about wanting to be loved, because we're all Stradivarius violins without bows. I didn't mean that pun. We are one of the difficulties of an unprepared, unscripted play. And we're cups without saucers. We are to be complimented. But the deep loneliness of which we are speaking comes from an excessive desire to be loved. The more I want to be loved, the less I am loved. The less I'm loved, the less lovable I become. The less lovable I become, the less I am capable of loving others. And that's how, by a desire to seek only oneself and to please oneself, one gets caught like a bird in a fowler's net. And the more one struggles to get out of this loneliness, the more one is captured by it. Just take some concrete examples of this desire to be loved. I know of a mother whose daughter was away at college. And she used to call up the daughter every night. Would keep the daughter on the phone for an hour and protested to the daughter that she was not appreciated as she should be. And because other girls in this college wanted to use the phone, she said to her mother, "Mother, I'm forbidden to use the phone anymore." One day, the superintendent had sent for her, and she was unable to answer the phone, and she told her mother, "Send someone to answer the phone for her." The mother said, "This is the end," and she refused to see her daughter again. Thus, by wanting too much to be loved without loving, one loses even the love that one seeks. And then there was a fiancée. She used to. I wonder if any of you young women in the audience ever do that. Do you know what she would do? She would write down in a book every time the boyfriend called how long he spoke. She also wrote down how often he wrote and how many words he wrote in each letter. She felt that she wasn't loved enough, so she began writing herself anonymous letters, threatening her. And she said that these letters came from a well-known author in the city. And finally, she was exposed by this man whom she blamed, and eventually the marriage was broken off. She just loved too much, loved to be loved. Then there was the wife who felt that her husband was paying no attention to her, insisted that he stay away from work. She wanted to go to a picnic, wanted to go to the beach, and he found excuses many times, and finally he lost his job. The marriage broke up. So one of the principal reasons of loneliness, therefore, is this egotism which seeks only oneself. And you can already see the cure anticipated by the mere fact that we mention this cause. But then there's another cause of loneliness, and that's on the part of the people who are not lonely. they do not bring any love to these people. Do you know what we should do? We should really concentrate a great deal on certain types of people. We should concentrate on the unfortunate, on the poor, on the socially disinherited, on the unloved, particularly the unloved, and on the ugly. And we bring love to them. We put love into them. Then they become lovable. Now, for example, you are very lovable to God. Did you know that? You say, well, what is there in me to love? Nothing. But he put his love into you. That's why you're lovable. And that's what we have to do with other people. And so the loneliness of these people is increased also because the rest of us will not listen to them. Listening is a therapeutic. There was a psychologist who formulated a marriage case that involved sexual, financial, social, and legal complications. He went to 100 clergymen and 100 priests to present the story, and he carried a stopwatch with him. Do you know how long they listened? The average was 2.5 minutes. Then off-the-cuff answer. They refused to listen. They refused to care. George Bernard Shaw has something rather good on that subject. In his play St. Joan, King Charles says to Joan, "Why do not the voices come to me? I am the king." And Joan answers, "They do come to you, but you do not hear them. You have not sat in the field in the evening listening for them. If you prayed from the bottom of your heart and listened to the thrilling of the bells and the trilling of them after they had stopped ringing, you would hear the voices, just as I do." In other words, listening is a therapeutic, a cure for lonely people. We do the same thing with our prayers. We wouldn't do to a doctor what we do to God. Would we go into a doctor and mumble off all of our symptoms and then say, "Bye, doctor"? Not listen. So listening on our part, refusal to listen, is one of the causes that intensifies this forsakenness. Now, what is a cure? Well, there are several cures, and we will just have time to mention one that is very important, namely caring for other people. When we're lonely, go out and serve. Then loneliness goes out through our fingertips. Our heart opens. The Chinese have a proverb, if you're without shoes, go out and find a man without any feet. Caring for others. I remember when I first went to Europe to study, to do my university work as a young priest. The first Christmas I was lonely. I was really lonesome. I think it was the only time in my life I was lonesome. What would I do? So I went to someone in the city of Louvain and asked for a list of the worthy poor. And I went to this particular alley. It was the wrong address, actually. I got into Rat Alley. When the door opened, there, earthen floor, was a blind father at a stove. 10 children barefooted around the stove. A ladder leading up to the second floor. One bed upstairs, bed downstairs. The children slept crosswise. I asked the family what they had. This was Christmas Eve, what they had for dinner, and she opened a bag of straw. Children had no sabots, no wooden shoes. I took care of them for 4 years while I was studying at the university. Got them jobs, rehabilitated them. I felt at times perhaps they were drawing on me. But do you know that the day that I went up for my examination as a professor at that university, I went in at 9 o'clock to face 200 professors. I saw the whole family coming down the street. I asked them where they had been. They said, for the last 2 days, we've been at a shrine praying for you that you would pass the examination. We walked all the way back. I was never lonesome again. That's the cure. Helping the neighbor. But here's something to remember, too. We think we should not be lonely. In this age of psychiatry, there are 2 or 3 conclusions that our world has drawn which are false. One is that we should never have a tension. Certainly we have tensions. We must have them. We've got body and spirit, and they go in opposite directions. They have 2 different landing fields. Certain tensions are normal. If we didn't have them, we would be abnormal. And then we're lonesome. Sure. There's a metaphysical loneliness. Perfection is not here. This is not our home. I've got something that I want in my heart that nothing on this earth can satisfy, and nothing can satisfy you either. And we know it very well. So what's the cause of this loneliness? What are we looking for? Well, we say we're looking for God. Yes. But then I know what you will answer. What does God know about loneliness? Now that's a good question. That's a good question. What does he know about loneliness? Does he know anything about the loneliness, for example, of a babe in Afghanistan who has no better home than just straw? Does God know anything about the loneliness of a mother who has to gather up a child in order to escape a dictator and fly halfway across Africa? Does God know anything about the loneliness of a man that's born on the wrong side of the tracks? Who's isolated socially from people simply because his hands are calloused with common labor and is denied decent society? Sure, does God know anything about that kind of loneliness, for example, in which one is expelled from a city, disowned by one's own people? Does he know anything about the loneliness of being deserted by friends? Does he even know anything about the loneliness of feeling doubts? Doubts even about religion, doubts even which one cries out, "Why hast thou abandoned me?" Does God know anything about these things? Yes, those are good questions. Now suppose that there was a figure that came into all of this loneliness and so immersed himself in it that he would not immunize himself from it, would not cut himself off from it. Would you, for example, be the only one on the battlefield that was whole and not help any of the wounded? And so if there was a figure that came into this world of ours and refused to isolate himself from loneliness and felt it so much that blood poured out from his body, felt loneliness so much that as if all the robberies of the world were thrust into his hands, as if he himself were guilty, that felt all loathsome carnality so much that his flesh was hanging from him like purple rags. Suppose someone came into this world and went into all of this loneliness, took it all, and was not overcome by it, but conquered it all. Then what? Then I may be lonely every now and then, but I'll not be overcome by it. Then I have a captain, kind of a captain who yet presses not a button in heaven from a celestial command. But I have a captain who stumbled to a throne.
Bishop Sheen will return in a moment.
Did that telecast seem a little short to you? Actually, I was just informed that we were 1 minute short. Now, I have a clock before me over there, and I keep my eyes on it. But this clock here was right. I finished 3 seconds before the time. But up in the control room, that celestial command that I just talked about, they figured it wrong by 1 minute. So they asked me if I could, instead of coming out for a very brief closing, come on and talk to you for 1.5 minutes. Now, you are put to the test. If that telecast seemed very short, you are enjoying it. We would say time passed like anything. If you were not enjoying it, it seemed very, very long. As a matter of fact, this 1.5 minutes will seem interminable to you. Now, I want to tell you, my good people, that I have to leave you now. Are you a bit lonely? I am. I'm lonely too. Bye now, and God love you.
Fulton J. Sheen is indeed a man for all seasons. He walked a paced beat, allowing us to glimpse his nature and ponder its worth and to enjoy its presence. Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs and ministered in many parts of the world to people of every belief. As he said many times, it is not a unity of religion we plead for, but a unity of religious people. We may not be able to meet in the same pew, but we can meet on our knees. The bishop wrote 94 books, recorded countless radio shows, and appeared on hundreds of network and syndicated television programs. His legacy is a treasure of joy that transcends time and helps us to believe that truly life is worth living.
You heard the title of this telecast. It was sort of inspired by something that happened to me when I was 6 years old. I was just beginning to be an altar boy. And the pastor called me up to the altar. They were cleaning the church. And he said, come. So I went up to the altar, and he gave me a great big missal. It's a Latin book that we use during Mass. And he said, go now to the back of the church and then into the rectory with this book. Well, it was very heavy for a 6-year-old boy, and it was a long aisle. So as I got toward the end of the aisle, I began running, afraid I wouldn't make it. And there was coming into the church a woman with a basket with bundles. One bundle I remember was potatoes. And I bumped into her, knocked her over, the potatoes, I fell over, and I fell in front of the big Latin book. And she said, why don't you read comic books like the other boys? Well, that was my introduction to Come, Come, Go, Go. You could never guess what it's about. I will merely begin by saying that the world is rather divided into two groups of people today. There is what might be called the go-go group, and then there's the come-come group. The go-go group is the new breed. The come-come is the old breed. The go-go demand that we go into the world. We live in a secular universe. We must serve it. The come group is come apart. Get away from the world. It's wicked. Go-go's God is dead. The world is wicked and evil. This is the group that believes in the pendulum without the clock. And this is the clock without the pendulum. This is the flowing waters without a bed to the river. This is the bed with no waters in it. It would be wonderful if we could ever get the two groups together. And they should be together. Because when we go back to the life of our blessed Lord, we find that the first words of his public life were, come. Come to me. And the last words of his public life were go. Go into the world. Come first to get an idea. Strength, inspiration, motivation. Then action, dynamism, fluidity, serving the secular world. This is the way the two should be kept together. When they are kept together, what do you find? I think you get modern saints. I'm going to talk about modern saints, not plaster saints, not canonized saints, saints that are uncanonized, but rather those whom the world, not whom religion, those whom the world regards as saints. And their common characteristic is this. It's a phrase from Thomas Aquinas. Contemplata alias tradere. In other words, go and give to others what you have already contemplated. First the come, the idea, the contemplata. Then the go, deliver it to others. Now, quite apart from any view that you may have concerning these whom I am about to mention, about their politics, their economics, their theology, or anything else, whom does the world generally regard as the four great leaders and saints? Gandhi. That's one. 2, President John F. Kennedy. 3, Pope John the 23rd. And 4th, Hammarskjöld. Formerly of the United Nations. Each had a great idea. Each first came. They got some contemplata. For Gandhi, what was it? Nonviolence to others, but violence to self. For Kennedy, what was the great hidden idea and inspiration? We're going to call it the occult cross. John the 23rd, love of God and neighbor. Hammarskjöld, interiority. Now the point is that these men were great, each and every one of them. Not because they started with a secular order, but because they started with a great inspiration, great idea, then activated it. Their ideas were motorized. First, Gandhi. I'm just looking at the clock to see how much time I can give each saint. I've got 15 minutes, 4 saints. That'll be less than 4 minutes for each saint. I'm not going to have much time. So this would be the quickest life of the saint that you ever heard about in your life. First, Gandhi. The great inspiration of Gandhi's life was nonviolence to others with violence to self. He said, after reading the Sermon on the Mount, as far as that is concerned, I am a Christian. He believes that one of the reasons people make war against others is because they've never been made war against themselves. So before he preached nonviolence, he was violent against everything in himself that leaned toward egotism and selfishness. When Gandhi was 37 years of age, he took the vow of celibacy. And he kept it until his death. And he said, I felt that any particular human love that I might have in marriage would narrow me, and I wanted to love all of mankind. And then another form of violence, fasting. Gandhi wrote better about fasting than I think any man in our contemporary world. He related prayer and fasting. Prayer, he said, attaches us to God, but fasting detaches us from creatures. And then he gave a new concept to fasting. He said, fasting has great influence on those whom we love. Whom we love. He said it will not have a great effect on tyrants, but it will on others. He wanted, first of all, by his fasting, to share in the hunger and the misery of his own people. And the only way that he could do this was by feeling within himself the gnawing pangs of hunger. And after he had conquered himself, then he began preaching nonviolence to others. And for what reason? For the sake of freeing the untouchables. Those people of India that were ignored. One was not even to touch them. And he fasted to free them. And that Gandhi did. So his great contemplata was this idea from the Sermon on the Mount. Crush the ego, and then you'll begin to have influence on society. So it's first the come, come, then the go, go. And then the second, President Kennedy. You know, I read 5 or 6 books on President Kennedy, and none of them seemed to strive to catch the soul. What was it? The books that you read are only succession of events. It's very much like describing a violin solo by dragging the hair of a dead horse over the entrails of a dead cat. The soul is gone. What was the contemplata? What was the great idea? I think it was the occult cross. Something that one did not speak about. He knew what it was, he knew it from his faith, but I'm not speaking just of that. He had hurt his back playing football at Harvard. Then on August the 2nd, 1943, when he was lieutenant commander of a PT boat in the Pacific, Japanese destroyer spotted them in the dark and cut the boat in two. One of the men were killed. In fact, all were announced later as dead. He was in the water 13 hours. But when that destroyer hit his PT boat, he was thrown flat on his back on the boat, and he said, "Now I know what it is to die." That back was a cross, occult. Came to know pain. Pain that wasn't to be spoken of. 2 operations, twice given the last rites of the church. Campaigning, he would sometimes go to the entrance of a hall where he was to lecture with his crutches and then throw the crutches down in order that no one would know that he was in pain. This was something to be hidden. Now, what does pain do to make a man great? Well, pain is a purifier. We get learning out of books, but we get wisdom from suffering. Never go to consult a man who hasn't suffered in some way. Pain is like the tightening of the strings of a violin. Produces better melody. Pain is like the hammer and the chisel, hacking away great chunks of egotism and selfishness on a rock in order to bring out the form. Pain is the burning away of dross in order to reveal gold. And that pain and that agony, he continued, until the night before the cross became rather revealed in Dallas, when he said in a lecture, "The old men dream dreams, and the young men see visions," as he put it in his inaugural address as he concluded, "On this earth, God's work is our work." This, I think, was the contemplata, the come, that made him great. For the Lord had laid on him his crucified hands and left the scars on Kennedy, scars that made him great. Pope John, well, he's simple to analyze. His contemplata was simply love of God and love of neighbor. That's why he had such a wonderful sense of humor. He lived in 2 worlds. Love mankind. I remember he told me once, he said, "My philosophy of life is never to make anything complicated. Make everything simple." But when he was a cardinal, for example, in Venice, sometimes the canals overflow. And this particular day, there was a heavy rain and the canals overflowed and the water was about 6 inches deep. He went into a wine shop. And the winekeeper was a bit embarrassed to see the Cardinal of Venice coming in, and he said, "Dry throat, Eminence?" He said, "No, wet feet." I remember I went in for an audience once with Karsh. Remember the famous photographer? And Pope John posed for the photograph, and then he turned to me and he said, "You know, listen, from all eternity, God knew that I was going to be Pope. He had 80 years to work on me. Why did he make me so ugly?" But this love of God translated itself into this beautiful dictum of his, namely, "I love all humanity, and that's why I can never feel harsh toward any man." That's why I think he was the one to call the council. So he opened the doors of the church and brought the church out into the world. Brought the world into himself. Those great big arms of his were almost like those great columns of Bernini, except that they were fleshy, and he could, in a certain sense, embrace all humanity. And this was the one who made men love one another. That was his contemplata. He first came. Come to me, all ye who labor and are burdened. He did. He came. Then he went. Yet because he had an idea. Not just an action that turns into busybodyism, as it always does when one lacks a master emotion. And then finally, perhaps the one who was least known of all, and one of the truly great men of our times. There was only one man, I suppose, who ever knew him. And that was Stolpe. Sven Stolpe was the friend of his youth and his associate during life. Stolpe has done the best work that has been written on Hammarskjöld, called Dag Hammarskjöld, a spiritual portrait. It was only to Stolpe and to his diary that he ever committed his thoughts, called markings. He said, I had to have a fixed point. See, the contemplata, fixed point. He knew where he was going. He said, there was a day in my life when I said yes to someone. And what was his characteristic? It was interiority. An unseen spiritual existence that nobody knew about. When he was a boy, he lived intimately with the sorrow of his father. His father was a political figure. He suffered unjustly, labored under many false accusations. And in the midst of that, Hammarskjöld began turning to the scriptures and saw that that was the life of Christ, that he had suffered and died in order to bring peace to the world. So he began to think of how he could bring peace. Stolpe says of him, he never married. Stolpe said he was the purest man I ever knew in my life. And he wrote 3 brief poetic lines about his chastity, in which he said, hidden away, the heat transmutes the coal into diamonds. What is a diamond but a carbon on fire? And so he said he felt that by not using this power, it could be transmuted. As he put it in another way, on another occasion, he said there are various ways of getting with a great creative act, and one way, he said, is to not just the sexual act. It is one complete and total act of sacrifice. He prayed that he might gather his whole life up into one such brave moment of surrender. And before he left for the Congo, he wrote on he asked that a plaque be put up for those who give their life to peace. And 13 days after that, 13 years to the very day, he was killed. And he wrote something which sums up his life. He said, "The road, you must follow it. The fun, you must forget it. The pain, you must endure it. The truth, you shall be told it. The end, you shall pursue it." These are our saints, the men who came first to God and then went. It does not require much time to make us a saint. It requires only much love.
Bishop Sheen was a pioneer in Christian broadcasting. He produced thousands of radio shows and appeared on countless television programs. When he received television's Emmy Award, Bishop Sheen said, "Thank God for a good season."
Did you notice that there was no interruption during this entire program? Do you know the only man that hates to be interrupted in the middle of a sentence is a prisoner? And it happens that this is a program in which there's no interruption of a sentence either. Thanks for listening. Pay attention, therefore, to our sponsors. Bye now, and God love you.
Fulton J. Sheen is indeed a man for all seasons. He walked a paced beat, allowing us to glimpse his nature and ponder its worth and to enjoy its presence. Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs and ministered in many parts of the world to people of every belief. As he said many times, it is not a unity of religion we plead for, but a unity of religious people. We may not be able to meet in the same pew, but we can meet on our knees. The bishop wrote 94 books, recorded countless radio shows, and appeared on hundreds of network and syndicated television programs. His legacy is a treasure of joy that transcends time and helps us to believe that truly life is worth living.
Here in the studio, there are cameras at various angles for the audience to see. And though these telecasts are all in color, they have not been reproduced in color, always in the station. So it was quite an unusual experience to find that we were in color here in the studio, so we could see ourselves. what does one do then with the old black and white? That's what I was thinking about. And there immediately came to my mind the story of a man who was an expert in throwing a boomerang. And he could throw that boomerang around a house, it would come back to him. He could throw it around a tree 3 or 4 times, it would come back to him. And a friend saw him and said that he ought to have a really good new boomerang. So he sent to Australia and got a new boomerang inlaid with pearl. And he gave it to the expert. 6 months later, he came back to see how the expert was getting on with his new boomerang. And his wife said, he isn't here anymore. He's in a mental hospital. Yes, what happened? He went crazy trying to throw away the old boomerang. We're going crazy in this studio trying to throw away the old black and white. My angel is naturally always flying. But do you know that for a little relaxation, he decided a week ago to take a sea voyage. And there was a terrible storm. And almost everybody in the whole ship was seasick. And a young woman was just getting ready for bed, and she was taken very seasick. And she ran out down the corridor to the bathroom, and the angel, I don't know where an angel gets seasick, but at any rate, my angel did get seasick, and so he dashed out of his room, seasick as he could be. His wings were down, and he bumped into this girl, and oh, she was so ashamed and abashed. He says, all right, lady, I'll never live to tell the story. Why did we choose to talk about laughter and humor today? Because really there's a tremendous amount of gloom in the world. Did you know that there is a book entitled Gloom in Modern Literature? One finds it in the novels like one of John Steinbeck's novel, Kathy, who burned her parents, did everything that was evil, very serious play. Many of the dramas that you see today on Broadway are gloomy things. Architecture's gloomy. There's no decoration. Nothing to relieve a straight line. The songs of the young are gloomy. Imagine a 15, 16-year-old boy and girl singing songs about how their heart is already broken. They're ready to die. But you have to say die 15 times. Die, 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 die. They're ready to die with gloom. But principally, there's no satire. That, I think, proves our over-seriousness. You cannot satirize an Irishman, you can't give a brogue, can't imitate a Jew, can't imitate Negro dialect, can't tell jokes about Italians, can't tell jokes about Poles, can't tell jokes about Catholics, can't tell jokes about Protestants. Really, we're a serious people. And when this world is the only world there is, believe me, we got to be serious. It's like a child that's got a ball and he's told this is the only thing you're ever going to have during life. He can't play with it too much. But if he's told, well, later on you're going to have another one that'll never wear out and always give you great pleasure, oh, you can have fun with this one. So, because there's so much gloom, we're going to say something about laughter. Now, you never meet laughter in the universe until you meet man. Man is the only joker in the deck of nature. Hyenas have their mouths open, but they do not really laugh. And animals are funny only when they imitate a man. The reason monkeys are funny is because they look like us. Cow isn't funny. A cow doesn't look like us. Dogs are funny when they sit up and beg, because we beg. I had a dog that I once trained to say his prayers, and he would put his head between his paws and wouldn't move until I said amen. Well, that was funny because he imitated a man. Then I also taught him, I would give him candy or meat, anything that he liked, and say, Lent, fast. And he wouldn't touch it until I said Easter. Now, why is it that you do not meet laughter until you meet man? I once gave a telecast on another side of laughter, but here I'm going to discuss it in relationship to gloom in the universe today. But why is it that man alone begins laughter in the universe? The reason is very simple. Man belongs to two worlds. He has a divine image. And then he belongs to this animal world of ours. He's like an animal. Now, when you belong to two worlds, you've got really an opportunity for humor, for laughter. And the laughter begins whenever man begins to degrade slightly this divine image. Whenever there's a falling off from dignity, not the destruction of dignity. Oh, no. For example, death is not funny, because that's the complete destruction. But where there is a decrease of value in man, then there's laughter. Now, let's just take some simple examples. We often see men walking down the street with the hat on the side of the head. We don't laugh at them. Did you ever see a bishop's mitre? It's a great big high hat, pointed to the top. This is the yarmulke. This is not a mitre. But if I one Sunday wore my mitre on the side of my head like that, I know a bishop who wears his that way because he's bald in front. Well, that's funny, see? Because this is a slight degradation of the divine image. So the straw hat on a man that walks down Broadway is not funny, but a mitre cocked on the side of my head is very funny. Take, for example, a dog running down the street is not funny. But a dog in church is very funny. Any animal in church. Why? Simply because here there's a kind of an elevation out of the animal kingdom up to the divine. It's a kind of a simulation, an attempt to almost become divine, and so it becomes very funny. I heard of one priest who had a dog, and the dog came wandering around the altar, and he was saying Mass, and he gave it a kick so he turned around and said, "Lord be with you," and he missed the dog, and he said, "I'll get you at the Pray Brethren." Today we see a lot of running and jogging. Running isn't funny, but if you see a man running after a woman, it's very funny. Take, for example, a fall. We see chimneys fall. We see leaves fall. We see many things that imitate follow the law of gravitation. But they're never funny. But if a man falls, that's really funny, particularly if he considers himself very dignified. And maybe there's a profound theological significance in this. Perhaps it is related to original sin, the fall of man, which wasn't so funny in the beginning, but now is. And because man is at this borderline of the divine and the animal, we never laugh at his strength. We laugh at his weakness because of the nobility of his image. For example, if you saw a strong man lifting weights, you wouldn't laugh. Have you ever seen a strong man trying to open a drawer? That's very funny. And it's funny simply because there's the incongruity of this strength not being able to open a drawer. Or trying to get a cork out of a champagne bottle. That's why everybody, when they open champagne at a party, everybody looks at the man who's opening the champagne. Because they want to see, if possible, if there's any kind of contrast. Well, that's the reason then for laughter, is because man is in some way related to the divine. Now let us get into the lighter side of it and discuss humor. What is humor, and what makes anything humorous? Well, humor, I think, can be described in one word. Humor is transparency. We say, for example, if a man has no sense of humor, we say he's thick. If, however, he is a sense of humor, we say he can see through things. He will get puns, for example, points of stories. The over-serious man he's like this. He's opaque. Can't see through it. The humorous man is like a window pane. Oh, he's like the glass on that television camera there. You can see through it. Now, who are the humorous people of the world? Well, all saints are, because they don't take anything very seriously. And that is why our blessed Lord spoke in parables. A parable is basically something very funny. For example, sunset is not a sunset. It's a revelation of the quickness of judgment. And new wine in old bottles, not to be taken seriously. That's the story of trying to put new ideas into old institutions. Sheep and goats, good and bad fish, the holy and the unholy. All parables are based upon a transparent universe. Poets see that. Poets are marvelous at seeing it. For example, Thompson. I gave you once a telecast on Thompson. Oh, you missed that, did you? Well, you should have stayed in that night. Thompson calls the sun a host, and the day a priest. And each morn the day goes to the Orient tabernacle, lifts from out it the host, raises it in benediction over the world, and then sets it in the flaming monstrance of the west. That's not taking a sunset very seriously. That's seeing the divine through it. Seeing the stars as glittering tapers lit about the day's dead sanctities. Wordsworth was walking through the forest once, and he said to a companion, "Down on your knees, man, there are violets." And even the lighter things of life. One of the reasons I like to read Chesterton is because he only took one or two things seriously. The salvation of his soul and the existence of God were about the two things that meant everything to him. And I love the story of when he met his future mother-in-law for the first time, Mrs. Boggs. And Mrs. Boggs, knowing that her future son-in-law was to come, had the house papered in a light gray color. And when Chesterton came in, Mrs. Boggs said, "How do you like the wallpaper?" And Chesterton took a crayon out of his pocket and drew along the wall the picture of his daughter Frances, whom he wanted to marry. That to him, it was light to him, and she didn't say anything, so finally he married Frances Boggs and was very happy. And it wasn't for him, no telling where he would have ended, because one day he was giving a lecture. He found himself in Liverpool, and he sent her a telegram, and he said, "I'm in Liverpool, where ought I be?" And he could write interesting poems. We won't have time to give them, but I want to give you some funny poems and examples of poets who see the funny things of life. One, Hilaire Belloc, who was a great friend of Chesterton. Hilaire Belloc wrote cautionary tales. And here is this very learned historian and literateur giving morals in a humorous way. And the story of this little cautionary tale for children is not to lie. But notice how lightly he takes it. He doesn't pound down like a heavy moralist. There's humor. And this is about Matilda. Matilda told such awful lies, it made one gasp and stretch one's eyes. Her aunt, who from her earliest youth had kept a strict regard for truth, attempted to believe Matilda. The effort very nearly killed her, and would have done so had not she discovered this infirmity. For once toward the close of day, Matilda, growing tired of play, and finding she was left alone, went tiptoe to the telephone and summoned the immediate aid of London's noble fire brigade. Within an hour, the gallant band were pouring in on every hand, from Putney, Hackney, Downs, and Bow, with courage high and hearts aglow, they galloped roaring through the town. Matilda's house is burning down. Inspired by British cheers and loud, proceeding from the frenzied crowd, they ran the ladders through a score of windows on the ballroom floor, and took peculiar pains to souse the pictures up and down the house, until Matilda's aunt succeeded in showing them they weren't needed. And even then she had to pay to get the men to go away. Now it happened that a few weeks later, her aunt was off to the theater to see that interesting play, The Second Mrs. Tanqueray. She had refused to take her niece to hear this entertaining piece, a deprivation just and wise, to punish her for telling lies. That night, a fire did break out, and you should have heard Matilda shout. You should have heard her scream and bawl and throw the window up and call to people passing in the street, the rapidly increasing heat, encouraging her to obtain their confidence, but all in vain. For every time she shouted fire, they only answered, "Little liar." And therefore, when her aunt returned, Matilda and the house were burned. Then remember the prayers that were translated from the French of the little donkeys, the little animals that went into the ark, by Carmen Bernos de Gotzold. This is one on the donkey. Prayer of that poor donkey. He prays to God, and he says, "God, who made me to trudge along the road always, to carry heavy loads always, and to be beaten always, give me great courage of gentleness. And one day, let somebody understand me, that I may no longer want to weep, because I can never say what I mean, and they make fun of me. Let me find a juicy thistle, and make them give me time to pick it. And Lord, one day, let me find again my little brother at the Christmas crib." That's taking the world lightly. And so on. And then there is, if I have time, there is also what is called by psychologists paradoxical intention. This is where we begin to laugh at ourselves. Spiritually, this means self-examination, when we do not take ourselves too seriously. But there are some people, for example, who get very nervous when they have to meet people, their hands sweat, they get jittery. And the psychologists have developed paradoxical intention, and they will tell them to sweat just as much as you possibly can. And say to yourself, now I'm going to sweat. I never sweated before like this, but I'm going to sweat and sweat and sweat. So they can stand off and really laugh at themselves, and they give it up. There was a boy who stuttered. And so they gave him a stuttering part in a play. And he didn't stutter. He didn't stutter because he had to stutter. And really this, I don't have time to develop, but this is a spiritual exercise of laughing at ourselves. Even seeing ourselves as sinners brings on redemption. Do you know that there is one place in Scripture where God laughs? Did you know that? In fact, it's in several places, but there is one time. I have a minute and a half, do I? Yes. There is one time when God laughs. You'll find it in the second Psalm, you'll find it in the book of Proverbs, you'll find it in another one of the Psalms. I don't know whether to tell you when it is or not, where it is, or when it is. But it's this. God laughs when men say he is dead. Interesting, isn't it? God must be splitting his heavenly sides. And all of our philosophers who are saying that he is dead, that could be the prelude to judgment and to hard things that wouldn't be a bit funny. And so maybe it's better for us all to realize that we wouldn't be so thirsty if we hadn't once tasted water. We wouldn't be so anxious and so distraught if we'd not already forgotten the good Lord. So let's not make God laugh. Let us laugh. I hope I make you happy and wiser. In any case, bye now, and God love you.
Fulton J. Sheen is indeed a man for all seasons. He walked a paced beat, allowing us to glimpse his nature and ponder its worth and to enjoy its presence. Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs and ministered in many parts of the world to people of every belief. As he said many times, it is not a unity of religion we plead for, but a unity of religious people. We may not be able to meet in the same pew, but we can meet on our knees. The bishop wrote 94 books, recorded countless radio shows, and appeared on hundreds of network and syndicated television programs. His legacy is a treasure of joy that transcends time and helps us to believe that truly life is worth living.
We just had a kind of an interesting experience here. We were ready to start the show. The announcer had just made the announcement, and then they stopped. A man in the control room sent out the message, "The bishop has loused it up." And I did. Because there's always a little time for a commercial, and I walked out. I spoiled it, so we started again. When I was coming in to the airport the other day, there was a soldier who evidently had been away for a couple of years, and his wife was there, young wife, to meet him at the airport, and they had a very warm embrace, and he was looking over her shoulder as he embraced her, and he says, "Oh, there goes Kitty McCoy." And the wife said, "Who is she?" Oh, he said, "She was the stewardess on our flight." She said, "How did you know her name?" Oh, he says, "The names were up on the bulletin board. Pilot, co-pilot, stewardess." She said, "What was the pilot's name?" This telecast is not going to be what you think it is. I know you've heard the song, "Love is a many splendored thing," but I'm going to tell you the origin of that expression, a many splendored thing. I'm going to tell you who really wrote it, but I will tell you in a minute. It is a very interesting life because it's somewhat related to our age, in which there is a fondness for flight from consciousness. What is there, anyway, in human nature that makes it rather anxious to evade and escape consciousness and responsibility? Alcohol, dope, sleeping tablets, whatever they happen to be. A way to avoid the responsibility of being awake. And I'm going to tell you the story of a man who had a flight from consciousness. And in this story, we find revealed the unconscious influence of little things. Jean Guiton, a member of the French Academy, said that while he was a prisoner of the Nazis in Germany, one night he and a number of other prisoners amused themselves by each telling how his mother and father met. Circumstances were quite accidental. Sale of a lottery ticket, chance meeting, fall on the street, blind date, wrong address. And here, as a result of these trivial things, here were men that were prisoners under a totalitarian system. It was the little thing that influenced the life of Francis Thompson, who wrote, "Love is a many splendored thing." And what was that small thing? Well, this young man started for the priesthood, and he was told he did not have a vocation. And then he went into medicine. His fondness was literature. He used to produce as a little boy the plays of Shakespeare for his sisters. And as he was studying medicine in the University of Manchester, he roamed into every bookstore, and at that particular time there had just appeared a Life of De Quincey. He evidently had mentioned the fact that at home that he loved De Quincey. And on his 17th birthday, his mother gave him De Quincey's famous work, The Confessions of an Opium Eater. And his 17-year-old eyes fell upon this line of De Quincey. Why, at the age of 17, should I have become a prisoner and a prey to this drug, and lost my mind and my freedom? The mother never intended that her son Francis Thompson should ever follow in the steps of Thomas De Quincey. But he did. So he went in for the psychedelic, for the flight from the unconscious. And here there's a curious parallel between the life of De Quincey and the life of Thompson. De Quincey lived earlier than Thompson. When De Quincey became a dope fiend, he went to London, to Soho Square. So did Thompson. And this further parallel, when they went to Soho Square, De Quincey had in his pocket a book of English poetry, we do not know which poet it was, and a copy of the Greek dramatist Euripides. When Thompson went, he had in one pocket Blake, and in the other pocket Sophocles. When they went to London, they both went to the same place, Soho Square. How well I know it. I've spent 5 years of my life in Soho Square. Not continuously, but many, many summers and many winters during my university days. It acquired its name in the 17th century because that was the area of London where the huntsmen used to gather to chase the hounds. And the head huntsman would call the hounds with Soho. It became known as Soho Square. It's very famous. Just a block away is Greek Street. That's where Karl Marx lived for a third of his life, in great poverty. This founder of communism, his wife said, "Karl, if you had only made more capital instead of writing about it, the whole world would have been better off." I had many experiences there in Soho Square with the type of person, of course, that Thompson actually is and was. But here are the two of them, decades apart, roamed the street. Thompson made a little money here and there, chasing cabs, holding a horse, selling matches, running an errand. Just a bum. A bum. Emaciated and thin, from drug and hunger. No one was there to befriend him except a woman of the streets. And one wonders, in all of literature, if there ever was a greater tribute paid to a woman of the street than Thompson paid this woman. He wrote about her in a poem to Monica Meynell. We will tell you about the Meynells in a moment. And this is his description. Then there came past a child like thee, a spring flower, fallen from the budded coronal of spring. A spring flower, fallen from the budded coronal of spring. And through the city streets blown withering, she passed, O brave, sad, lovingest, tender thing, and of her scant pittance did she give, that I might eat and live Then fled a swift and trackless fugitive. The same thing happened to De Quincey. When he was in the depths of poverty and degradation, a woman of the streets befriended him. We know her name. Her name was Anne. Thompson, or rather St. Augustine, never gave the name of the woman with whom he lived before he was converted. Thompson never gave the name of this one. But he went out and searched for her. Now, why he searched is interesting. He gathered up in dusty old, dirty papers an article and a few poems, and he sent them to Wilfred Meynell, who was the editor of Merry England. And in the letter to Wilfred Meynell, he said, "You may return the manuscript and the rejection slip to Francis Thompson, Charing Cross Post Office, general delivery." He never heard for 9 months. So in those 9 months, he went into despair. He wanted to find this woman. He could not do it. She said to him as she left, "You are always a genius. You're above me." And sinking lower and lower, he then took up his residence in Covent Garden. Covent Garden at one end in London was the Opera House. Down the street, Maiden Lane Church. You go down 2 or 3 steps to go into it. Wish we had an hour and a half. I would tell you about an interesting character that I met there. But in television, you get time in segments. And then in front of the opera was Covent Garden. Covent Garden was where all of the produce of England was brought every morning. So in those days of Thompson was born in 1859. In those days, there were 2-wheeled carts, horses, baskets, dirt, and refuse. And used to sleep under those carts, being awakened by the pounding of the horses' hoofs. And I wonder if anyone ever weary of life ever penned such lines as these. Forlorn and faint and stark, I had endured the watches of the dark and the abashless inquisition of each star. The abashless inquisition of each star. Yea, was the outcast mark of all those heavenly passers' scrutiny. Stood bound and helpless for time to shoot its barbed minutes at me. Suffered the trampling hoof of every hour in night's slow-wheeled car, until the tardy dawn, dragging me at length from under those dread wheels, and bled of strength, I awaited the inevitable last. So he decided to take his life. And he'd saved up his pennies, bought enough of dope to kill himself. Under these wheels, he could see a distant clock on the spire of a church. It was that prompted him to say that time was shooting its barbed minutes at him. He took half of the dope, and he felt a hand on his that held him back from the fatal other half. He said it was the hand of Chatterton, a poet that had lived 100 years before. He gave up the attempt at suicide, and the next day, news came to him that Wilfred Meynell wanted to see him. The 9 months had passed. Now begins a kind of change of life. Wilfred Meynell attempts a cure, sends him out to the Abbey of Storrington, and here we enter into a new phase of his life, his love of children. And as he roamed about the fields of Storrington, he met a little girl whose name was Daisy Stanford. And this is what he wrote of Daisy. Here she came with a few tokens, raspberries and such things, and he said that his own heart went down to her hand. But her beauty smoothed earth's furrowed face. She gave me tokens 3, a look, a word of her winsome mouth, and a raspberry. The fairest things have fleetest end. Their scent survives their close. But the rose's scent is bitterness to him that loved the rose. We will continue in a moment. How often an adult will have an inexpressible love for a sweet child. It's unreciprocated. They do not know they're loved. And this is Thompson's pain. She went her unrepentant way. She went and left with me the pang of all the partings gone, and the partings yet to be. She left me marveling why my soul was sad, that she was glad. At all the sadness in the sweet, and the sweetness in the sad. And then he ends. Nothing begins, nothing ends. It is not paid with moan, for we are born in others' pain and perish in our own. The love went out from his life. But then he found some solace in little Olivia Meynell. Sweet little child, but here was his life spoiled. And with the pillaring hours about to crush him, he seemed afraid of this beautiful innocence. And he wrote, I fear to love thee, sweet, because love's the ambassador of loss. Love's the ambassador of loss. White flake of childhood, clinging so to my soiled raiment, thy shy snow at tenderest touch will shrink and go. Love me not, delightful child, my heart by man's snares beguiled has grown timorous and wild. It would fear thee not at all, wert thou not so harmless, small, because thy arrows not yet dire are still unbarbed with destined fire. I fear thee more than hadst thou stood full panoplied in womanhood. And all the while, he's being haunted by something. And I told you of that poem of haunting. I gave it to you one year, The Hound of Heaven, that he wrote. He went back again to dope. The Meynell still cared for him. But this hound was pursuing him. But despite this shell, that shell that first came to the Meynells, he had no stockings on and his toes were out through his shoes and dirty old brown coat, no shirt. Consumptive, because of the nights he slept under the cartwheels of London. He still had this love that pulled him. Probably that was pulling him at the beginning of his life, and so he wrote, "O world invisible, we view thee. O world intangible, we touch thee. O world unknowable, we love thee. Turn but a stone and start a wing. 'Tis ye, 'tis your estranged faces that miss the many splendored thing. Love's the many splendored thing, not earth love, heaven love, that Thompson saw everywhere." And haunted by that love, he went finally to his reward. And one day, well, in London, I went out to Kensal Green Cemetery. And I asked someone whom I had met in the cemetery, "Do you know where the tomb or the grave of Francis Thompson is?" No, I never heard of him. So I walked and walked. And I finally came to a slab that read, Francis Thompson, 1859, 1907. And then there came a line, an unforgettable line that drew one back to all of his loves of childhood. And that last line on the tombstone was, "Look for me in the nurseries of heaven." Love's a many splendor thing.
Bishop Sheen will return in a moment.
In years to come, if you're looking for me, I'll be with Francis Thompson, so look for me in the nurseries of heaven. Bye now, and God love you.
Fulton J. Sheen is indeed a man for all seasons. He walked a paced beat, allowing us to glimpse his nature and ponder its worth and to enjoy its presence. Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs, and Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs and ministered in many parts of the world to people of every belief. As he said many times, it is not a unity of religion we plead for, but a unity of religious people. We may not be able to meet in the same pew, but we can meet on our knees. The bishop wrote 94 books, recorded countless radio shows, and appeared on hundreds of network and syndicated television programs. His legacy is a treasure of joy that transcends time and helps us to believe that truly life is worth living.
Friends, I received a letter from Canada not very long ago in which a mother told me that her two children for a long time had been very quiet, and when they were quiet, she suspected they were up to some kind of mischief. One was a boy of 4 and the other little girl of 3. Finally, she found the boy in the attic, had on his coat and his hat, and he was carrying a suitcase. And she said, "Where's your little sister?" "She's in the suitcase." "Well, where are you going?" "We're going down to New York to visit Bishop Sheen." And this is another true story that came to me that actually happened here in New York in the family of one of the FBI agents. The little girl, aged 3 or 4, was watching her father paint a crib. "What are you doing, Daddy?" "Painting a crib." "What color?" "White." "Where did you get the paint?" "Bought it at the store." "Where did you get the brush?" "Bought it at the store, too." "Daddy, at what time does the soul come into the body?" "When the body's about ready to receive it." "Daddy, do you wear a girdle?" That's an example of how a child's mind flies from one subject to another, and shows also the result of listening to television. Late in February 1954, I gave a telecast on the death of Stalin. It was a funeral oration over the dictator. A few days later, on the 5th of March, his death was announced. We hope that what we're saying tonight will not be so prophetic. A word about the pattern of betrayal, the formula of world revolution. We're going to show the pattern by which the Soviet Union hopes to take over the world. This proceeds in 3 steps. We'll mention the 3 and then describe each of them. This first principle applies only to themselves, namely materialism. That is their philosophy of life. The second applies to themselves and to us. It is the myth of coexistence. And the third step, which applies to both Soviet Union and ourselves, is destroy with a kiss. Now, this is the formula by which they have taken over so far about 33% of the world. 37 out of 100 people in the world are subject to them according to these ideas. First, materialism. Materialism, as you know, is their philosophy of life, which believes there's nothing but matter. There's no God, no soul. Now, why these 2 denials? They're intrinsic to communism. Why no God? Well, we can understand that. The second paragraph of our Declaration of Independence states that it is a self-evident principle that the Creator has endowed man with certain unalienable rights. In other words, we have rights and liberties, like freedom of press, freedom of conscience, freedom of association, which do not come from the government, which do not come from the will of a majority, which do not come from a state, These rights and liberties come to us from God. Therefore, the state cannot take them away. That is our principle. Now, they have to deny God, because that would be another source of rights than the state or the party. In order to build up this structure of theirs in which the party is supreme, they must hold that any right or liberty which the individual possesses comes to him from the party. Therefore, the party can take the rights and liberties away. But if there was a God, then there would be rights not dependent on the party. So they have to deny God. The second principle, there is no soul. Why that? Because the soul contemplates. And when one contemplates, one establishes personal relations with a reality which is not subject to social control. In other words, no one around me in society can control my thinking and my meditation. Now, communism cannot allow that. There may be no thoughts, no conclusions, no plans, except those approved by the government. And so their procedure is, first of all, to forestall any kind of contemplation by the soul by saying that it is a sign that you're a neurasthenic. And secondly, if you have any thoughts of your own, then by purges, by persecution, by drugs, and by starvation, and by standing for hours and hours before a blazing light, your thoughts are driven and expelled out of you. There can be no soul. Otherwise, you would have a retreat into which you could enter, where you would be free from the state. That's principle number one. The next, in order to destroy, there must be the myth of coexistence. Lenin said, communism must make use of every lie, deceit, strategy in order to further world revolution. Manuilsky, addressing the Soviet Congress, repeated something from the ancients: those whom the gods destroy, they must first make blind. In other words, they must deceive them. So the communists say, let us coexist in peace, peace, peace. At the end of the 19th century, there was a great Russian writer by the name of Soloviev, who in his work, The Three Conversations, said that in the 20th century a book would be written entitled Peace and Cooperation Among All Peoples, and it would be written by a dictator who would conquer the world. Do you know of any book that has a title like that? Why coexistence? If, for example, listening to me, there's a young man and young woman in love, do you say, you, the young man, say to the young girl, let's coexist? Does a husband say to his wife, let's coexist? Unless they're fighting. New York does not say to New Jersey, let's coexist. Canada does not say to the United States, let us coexist. Why then does Russia ask for coexistence? Interesting, isn't it? Here's the answer. Here are 5 houses. House 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's all we'll draw. Houses. In this house is Mr. A, who believes in heating his house by gas. Mr. B, believes in heating his house by electricity. Mr. C, oil. Mr. D, what have I got left? Coal. I don't, in case there's some sponsors around the nation that are in his business, I want to get them all in. Now it is agreed among them that they will use different forms of heating. There's no problem of coexistence among them. But suppose someone moves into a house down here whose name is Mr. K. Mr. K. Mr. K is an arsonist. Mr. K believes in heating his house with the kindling from A, B, C, and D. Can there be that kind of coexistence? Why does he ask for coexistence? He asks that the peaceful relations that exist between nations, free-loving nations, should be applied to a nation that does not believe in peace and justice. There cannot be that kind of coexistence. It is only a sham and a snare and a delusion. Why do they ask then for coexistence? Well, the answer was given in an article that appeared in the Communist magazine of Russia in 1954, written by Leon Tivev. Leon Tivev in this article said Russia was strong when it was a question of armies, because they had more men, more arms than any other nations of the world, and the other nations of the world, and could walk over them. But now there's come the atomic bomb, and since the atomic bomb, there can be mutual destruction. Soviet Union would be destroyed, so would other nations. So there must be, Mr. Leontiev goes on to say, long periods of coexistence until the historic moment comes when we are ready to strike. And when does that come? When does that happen? Well, that happens at a moment of greatest friendship, when a dictator visits another country to pledge loyalty and fidelity. As, for example, in 1939, when a treaty was signed between the Soviet Union and Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. Now, I could just as well read this off an idiot card, but the reason I'm not reading it off an idiot card, I'm reading, so I might just as well tell you. In an idiot card, I'd have to do this. I could use a teleprompter, and then I'd have to do this. So we're reading. These are the words of Molotov. These pacts of mutual assistance strictly stipulate the inviolability of the sovereignty of the signatory nations. Note that. The inviolability, in other words, of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. 1939. And the principle of non-interference in each other's affairs. We stand for the scrupulous observance of these pacts on the basis of complete reciprocity. And we declare that all talk is nonsense about the Soviet Union trying to Sovietize the Baltic countries. That in 1939. Sovereignty of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. They manage their own affairs. We will not Sovietize it. That was 1939, the moment of greatest friendship. 1940, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania were wiped off the earth as nations. Same with China. India is discovering it. Tibet is found out. In every single instance, a visit from a dictator. Some instances in Eastern Europe, long parades, visit to the operas, pledges of friendship, drinking toasts one to another, and then destroy with a kiss. Where did they learn it? Where did this formula come from? It came from Judas. Those were his stages. First, materialism. Not just avarice. We do not know anything about the avarice of Judas until the very last part of the public life of our Lord, in fact, about 10 days before. Avarice is only a consequence of other sins. It is not first. The first mention we have of the fall of Judas was when our blessed Lord announced that he came from heaven, that he would die for men, and that he would rise again from the dead and ascend into heaven and give us the bread of life. He had multiplied loaves and fishes and fed several thousand. And then the people came to make him king, and our Lord refused to be a bread king and fled into the mountains alone. And Judas said, so that's the kind of a king he is. He's interested in spirituality. He's giving himself as the bread of life. Why doesn't he be an economic king? And at that mention of the Lord giving himself as the bread of life, you find written for the first time that our Lord knew who it was who would betray him. He never believed. He was a materialist to the core. But that was for himself. Materialism is for the Soviet Union. Judas's second stage. Coexist with others. Lie. Deceive. Put on a false front. Pretend you're a friend. Never let anyone know your intentions. Talk of peace, peace, peace. Did anyone suspect Judas? Of course, our Lord did, because he is the Son of God. But I mean among men. John was the only one. And John kept it to himself. None of the other apostles knew. I think Peter was under more suspicion than Judas. Because when our Lord called Peter Satan, that's when there opened up a quarrel among them as to who would be first. The mother of James and John interceded for her sons, and after the transfiguration, the apostles quarreled as to who would be first. Even at the Last Supper, they quarreled. You say, but they knew that Judas was avaricious? Not necessarily. The night that Mary Magdalene poured ointment over the feet of our blessed Lord, all the other apostles, with the probable exception of John, joined in, saying, why could not this have been sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? Remember that Judas alone did not say it. The others did not know it was he. And then on the night of the Last Supper, our blessed Lord said, he who sits at table is about to betray me. And so each asked, except John, is it I? Is it I? Is it I? Is it I? Brazen Judas, coexistence to the end. Is it I? Peter said to John, ask the Lord who it is. Our Lord said it was the one who would dip his finger in the dish. He reached it to Judas, but the others did not know the sign. And when Judas left, they did not know the business of Judas. The other apostles thought that Judas had gone out either to distribute money to the poor under the direction of our Lord, or else to buy food for the feast. They did not in any way suspect that he was a traitor. Deceit, friendship, pledges of cooperation, mutual assistance, love. Oh, we're brothers, all of us. And then the third stage. When you have them all fooled, then it is that our blessed Lord meets him. And Judas came down over the brook of Kedron. Excuse me for looking down. They're changing my watch. I want to find out how much time I've got. Only 1 minute left? Oh, the watch is wrong. I'm sorry. I had 2.5. I have 1 minute left. So we'll have to hurry very quickly. And Judas came down over the brook and threw his arms around the neck of our blessed Lord and blistered his lips with a kiss. And our Lord said, "Friend, wilt thou betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" Oh, yes. Some things are so sacred and divine, their betrayal must always be prefaced by some mark of affection. My fellow men, my countrymen, beware, lest you say, "Wouldst thou betray America with a kiss?"
Bishop Sheen will return in just a moment.
Fulton J. Sheen, a man for all seasons. Bishop Sheen was a pioneer in Christian broadcasting. He produced thousands of radio shows and appeared on countless television programs. When he received television's Emmy Award, Bishop Sheen said, "Thank God for a good season."
As you know, all of these telecasts are given for the benefit of the poor and the sick in Asia, Africa, Oceania, and other parts of the world. It is interesting how some people make sacrifices in order to help our cause. Here's a letter that just came in. I received an invitation to attend a dinner for the Soviet dictator at the cost of $12.50 per person. Inflation or not, there are better uses for $12.50. Therefore, I am enclosing my check for $12.50 for all of the poor and the hungry of the world for whom you care, and for those behind the iron and bamboo curtains. Perhaps sometime you'd like to do without a dinner with the Soviet dictator for the sake of the poor. Would you? Bye now, and God love you.
Fulton J. Sheen is indeed a man for all seasons. He walked a paced beat, allowing us to glimpse his nature and ponder its worth and to enjoy its presence. Bishop Sheen authored over 90 books. He broadcast countless radio and television programs and ministered in many parts of the world to people of every belief. As he said many times, it is not a unity of religion we plead for, but a unity of religious people. We may not be able to meet in the same pew, but we can meet on our knees. The bishop wrote 94 books, recorded countless radio shows, and appeared on hundreds of network and syndicated television programs. His legacy is a treasure of joy that transcends time and helps us to believe that truly life is worth living.